After E3, the stream of information from the big three has slowed down, and the blatant backpedaling and grandstanding has cooled off. Microsoft shot itself in the foot with an overwhelmingly anti-consumer ideology behind the Xbox One. Capitalizing on Microsoft's monumental blunder, Sony played on the backlash by saying they would do the opposite of the Xbox One with the PS4 by partially upholding the status quo. The PS4 will require a monthly $5 fee to use its online multiplayer, which is a little cheaper than an Xbox Live Gold account that is required to play multiplayer games online with the Xbox 360. That detail was conveniently glossed over amongst the thunderous reaction that hailed Sony as the savior of modern gaming. The original ideas behind Microsoft's Xbox One with its Kinect 2, like constant monitoring and limited use game policy, were so disliked that Sony had to make very little effort to paint themselves as the hero to Microsoft's distrustful and dangerous market view. Sony's conference not only put to rest consumer worries, but went as far as to take shots at Microsoft's contemptuous outlook on the consumer. This is not exclusive to Microsoft, as any of the big three have had similar anti-used game policies as a result of choice from third-party developers. In an effort to save face, Microsoft has announced that they're going back on all those policies, so that the Xbox One will operate much like an Xbox 360, but with a mandatory Kinect. In a game trailer interview with Jeff Keighley, Jack Tretton labored this idea that Sony cares about the consumer, and explained at one point that their business plan can't be shaped by responding to the competition's strategy. Perhaps Sony was acting with their audience's best interest at heart, but it's doubtful. If the consumer believes these choices were made on consumer input, without competition's response, we would need to ignore the striking parallels made between their own conference and Microsoft's conference. Would you believe you could trust someone who cared so little in the past about the consumer, there was virtually no encryption securing user account information on the PlayStation Network? Is this really a group that cares about consumer value if PlayStation 2 compatibility was completely phased out to make cheaper models of the PS3? As well as the removal of Linux functionality just because they thought people would use it to pirate games. If this was a genuine priority, why would they need Microsoft to mess up first before making a big display of it? This is the product. Did you notice it? Did you get excited? Feel relieved that Sony was on your side? Cheer with the reporters in the crowd? If you did, you just bought it. Not the PS4, you bought an idea. They sold you a feeling of trust for a platform that didn't have it, and an industry that's been so lacking in it that it looks at the consumer as if they're guilty until proven innocent. Why would you want the industry standard and a $5 online fee instead of actual developments that were in the consumer's favor? It's easy to get caught up in the excitement after coming out of the hostile climate of the last couple years. Some of the press and industry has not only labeled consumers entitled for having certain expectations in the goods or services they purchase, but outright insulted them for not spending enough money to meet the industry's sales projections. It's almost as if someone thought bullying the consumer and mocking their ability to make choices would make them spend money. Who's the entitled one in this exchange? Does a new generation of consoles mean a fresh start? Do they really value what the consumer has to say? And the audience is no longer regarded as entitled consumers who need DRM and rob developers with these used game sales? Probably not. It's still just business, and with studios shutting down and an eagerness to try new and strange payment models, it's a safe bet your money is needed now more than ever to support a complex machine in desperate need of oil. So is anyone on the consumer side? Nintendo is the only one that hasn't been mentioned yet, but they seem to be the one who is most trustworthy. In the past, Nintendo has usually been more restrictive than Microsoft or Sony of what third parties can and can't do on their console. At E3, Reggie Fils-Aimé confirmed that Nintendo will not allow third-party developers to enforce DRM and anti-use sale tactics. When asked what Nintendo's view was for their own games, Reggie explained that their used game resale rate was much lower than their competitors, and not a problem since it's a goal with their titles to give them enough value that the player does not want to resell it. This sounds familiar. Only time will tell if Nintendo sticks to those claims, because things said at E3 have a funny way of disappearing. The consumer should be wary of what they're told by anyone who wants to make a sell. What's worth consideration, though, is when a company has a history of proactively making choices that deny them easy revenue for the sake of a consumer's ownership rights and services like free online multiplayer, such as Nintendo does. Nintendo also has the smallest offerings of DLC from the big three, and currently lacks a real system to support the microtransactions that some publishers are eager to force into place. While some games like to use CD keys to control who can play them, Nintendo's only use of game keys and online activation is limited to a benefits program called Club Nintendo. One man's punishment is another man's reward. Does this all mean Nintendo cares about you? It can't be said for certain, but they are, after all, a business. From a business viewpoint, these sorts of pro-consumer decisions increase brand loyalty and create a sustainable long-term plan. I've said before that Microsoft and Sony seem less insightful than the toy company turned video game giant. But Microsoft's concept behind the Xbox One and apparent surprise before going into damage control demonstrates the people on top had been living in a bubble. It's not all doom and gloom. Sony's capitalizing on Microsoft's mistake has at least cast a hard light onto many important issues that will hopefully keep the line of what is acceptable from moving for a while. Sony's fee for a strong online infrastructure may be worth it, but that just means it will help standardize the idea that consumers should pay more to use the internet they already own. So here's my predictions for what's in store. Microsoft has already done a full 180 in damage control, and trying to portray this as an act of goodwill rather than trying not to lose out to the other guy. Despite that, it probably still won't sell that well, since Kinect is part of the standard package, and Microsoft might bleed a little money with low early adoption rates. With the Kinect being a big part of the system's infrastructure, they may play down its functionality in titles, or sell a much cheaper bundle late into the console's lifetime that lacks the living room surveillance camera. Online payment and monetization methods are likely to stay the same. Sony will still sell an increased number of consoles as a result of Microsoft's mistake, as well as achieve moderate to great success with their online service by banking on being better than the other guy. They'll continue to tell the consumer that they own all those PlayStation Plus games, which is as silly as saying Netflix users own the 1,000-some movies as long as they maintain their subscription. With the inclusion of Gaikai, there might be a stronger push for digital distribution alongside disc sales. Digital games might be sold at a lesser price to encourage less physical ownership while portraying it as a consumer choice rather than a call by content producers. Nintendo might struggle to get Western third-party support for a while, but will be able to keep afloat on their first-party titles. Despite lacking the resources of Microsoft and Sony, it's got a substantial war chest and knows how to keep their costs out of the red. Nintendo's experience, insight, and ability to self-sustain with first and second parties, as well as self-publishing, means it releases strong titles free of the creative and time restraints of other publishers. History has shown the most successful console of each generation is always the one that's least powerful. The Atari 2600, the Nintendo Entertainment System, the PlayStation 2, and the Wii. If nearly a 4-decade-year-old pattern persists, the Wii U should be the most successful of the upcoming three. Its success most likely will be owed to its lower and more competitive pricing, and its overcoming its dry spell as the Xbox One and PlayStation 4 just get started with their own. Stay skeptical and informed. Remain hopeful and optimistic. Until next time. I want to give mention and thanks to Kyle, who helps me with my audio. He does video game reviews and some voiceover work. You can check out his channel here. I also want to give thanks to videogametalkinghead, who helped me with some fact checking. He also likes talking about video games. His channel is here.